Hi, everyone. My name is Colin Goldberg, and I'm a Techspressionist. I am zooming in from North Bennington, Vermont, in my brand new studio space, which I'm very excited about. And today we have a new format for the salon. It is called New Artists. And what it consists of is a set of four artists that were recently added to the Techspressionist Visual Artist Index, which is on our site. And that index spans over 350 artists from more than 45 countries. And today we have a very geographically diverse group, as well as, a diverse group in terms of the way that the various artists practice and use technology in their work. So without further ado, I am going to get the ball rolling with our first artist, Tina Anderson, who is zooming in from Moscow. So Tina, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Moscow based, but now I'm countryside, as you can see. If you don't mind, I can share in the screen. Okay.
Absolutely.
Um, okay, now here we go. I built sacred machinery from worlds what I have lost, their creator. This is my philosophy. That's how it looks like. Uh, I work as a visual architect and digital stenographer. I see the world as a machine built by a creator who left us without any instruction. Three worlds. The upper world, this is a sleeping goddess holding an armadillo sphere. The city lives because she breathes. She doesn't know it. The middle world, it's the world between everything. There, things change and nothing is certain. And the other world is machine hell. The machine still runs, but the signal is gone. That moment after the creator leaves, before everything stops. Um, this is inside my philosophy. And this is a little video works I can share. So it was a machine hell, and I'm very proud because it's a lot of exhibition with this material. And after machine hell, I decided to create something unique, and I create a series impossible object. It looks like this. Before the world existed, it was a workshop where the creator made prototypes were then never released, forms what exist only between intention and reality, never finished, never permitted to arrive. I call them impossible objects. I work from an archive other 100 primary sources, rare text, first edition, forgotten system of knowledge, so I can create something unique, just rebuild something forgotten. First of all, I start with the archive. I find patterns across centuries and translate them into the visual world. This is my base, and some my favorite books. And also, I use a hybrid form to create something unique. Third step, it's archive. Second is machine. Third is human. And the final is a unique artifact. This is very hard to understanding form, but I try to make something. Um, um, this is another one from Impossible Object. I love it all. And it's just Lynn's judge. It's judged by light, and the pilgrims waiting a judgment. This is my method to work. It's not so easy as you can think. I explored, find connection, generative images. I read, interrupt, choose, give focus. So we met in the middle and built artifact together. Kircher built organs through which the sound played music. I built digital machines through the 500 years, and forgotten knowledge becomes visible. Um, it's my education optics. So this is the final. It's another my work, and atmosphere place. It's not just about hell, but this is another one. And my triptych about alchemical twins. The twins wants to be separate. So the big tragedy, they can met. It's too real, and after that, it was a big tragedy because they can reconnect. It's called. Oh my god, I forgot this Japanese words. Yamatsuki or something like this. This is I rebuilt Leonardo da Vinci. It's a stage from one of the book, and this is this is my little part. I rebuilt Dante. It's a sacred place. It's pandemonium actually. Machine takes a lot of details from the very old book, the first edition, and we just rebuilt the form with IE. So I think it's very, very fun. But in the final, I want to show special work. I build it without any old archive. Oh, sorry, my bad English. It's work for Leroy Thornhill from Prodigy. He plays here in Moscow and St. Petersburg. So I'll create something in Giger style with my machines. I think it's fun, and it's so much fantasy you can create with IE, and something new and something old. Okay. Okay. I'm back. Sorry if it's so. It's my first time from very long time with English, and I'm just a little bit nervous.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much. You can, I guess, stop your screen share now if you want.
Thank you.
Excellent. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Awesome. Thanks so much. Really cool to meet you, so to speak, virtually, and to learn about your work. So, with all of the artists on the salon page, you can find out a little bit more about them and link to their website and Instagram. And I realized after Tina had started her presentation that I forgot to read the introductory text, so I will do that now. Tina Anderson is a cultural historian and visual architect using AI-assisted image making to realize dark mechanical worlds. Her work is inspired by the sacred and technological, where ritual, myth, architecture, and artificial bodies intersect. So actually, when after I realized I forgot to share that, I started thinking maybe I'll do that for the rest of the artists too. That way, you don't have a preconceived idea of what their work is going to be like. And I think that's actually kind of an interesting way to do it is just to have each artist present, and we don't know anything about them other than me or whatever you've read on the salon page if you've read it. So yeah, at least for this salon, I'm gonna stick to that protocol. So the next artist is Fawn, who is zooming in from Erskineville, which is I believe a suburb of Sydney, Australia. So with that, I will pass the mic over to Fawn. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Colin, for enabling this session. Um, Today, uh, for my artist introduction talk, I'll talk about three topics, which is sort of in line with what Colin just described of not really describing uh, myself first, but just to start with the work, talk about the why, then the how, and then a little bit of the who at the end. So why, the ideas that underpin my work, how, my process, and then who is my background. So on to the why. So I'd like to just start with a quick experiment, and just for you all just to look at the artwork for a few seconds, and just what do you see? And there's no right answer, so just take a couple of seconds. So if the artwork was successful, each viewer will see something different. Hopefully what you see will shift as you look longer. Our brains are pattern recognition machines running efficiently on about 10 watts of energy. Each pattern recognized, where there is none, is called pareidolia, which is seeing a rabbit in the clouds. These works focus on creating unresolvable ambiguity as a mechanism for creating presence, the conscious moment of unknowing. I noticed years ago that when I would walk on the rocks by the sea, I would see future cities, deep time. I then noticed in my art that I would see landscape, faces, surfaces, elevations, not fixed but fluttering, from one to the next. I realized that this was my architectural training. Within a single drawing, there might be a plan, section, or detail, often all at different scales. I further realized our collective visual perception is being retrained by social media, flipping from one image to the next, drone, microscope, aerial, portrait, celestial fly-through, constantly shifting. This is an accelerating phenomenon. In my work, I call this the perspectival flip, a fluttering between different readings of a work. This is not abstract expressionism. In abstract expressionism, false readings are discouraged. Expression and gesture are foregrounded. Here, the flip is intentional, a mechanism for shifting perception, embracing unknowing. So on to the how. What processes produce this work? So my art has two major phases, floor drawing, and then abstracting that drawing into a relief painting using my CNC machine. I won't go into my floor drawing today, but instead focus on my CNC process, which is probably more interesting for this particular forum. From the floor drawing, an image is selected for its pareidolia or perspectival ambiguity. The image is then abstracted through Photoshop, so changing color gradients, shifting to black and white. It's then abstracted again as that surface is lofted into a 3D surface, and then again changes are made within Rhino, where shifting the heights. And then as I take it into a CNC software, I create toolpaths and tooling, which further abstracts the reading of that image into that code. Once it's ready for cutting, I have an assembled substrate, which is generally made from recovered building materials and things that I recycle. And then I run the machine and then watch it. And this watching, I sort of equate to. So there's Marshall McLuhan media theory, which is talking about amputations and amplifications. And so a CNC machine amplifies the cutting, the hand aspect, but it also takes away. And so by watching the machine and interfering, changing, stopping, and starting, I'm actually reintroducing some of the time and the touch aspect of what's being lost through the CNC machine. This continues, and then at the end, I paint the artwork, which is sort of really about enhancing ambiguity and shifting color and contrast. So the abstraction process is a finding of a new artwork mediated with machine and material. The source material, such as the drawing on the left, is kind of inconsequential to some degree, and because it's really just a starting point. I try to use the CNC machine as a collaborator, not as a slave, and that was from a previous project where I was using 3D printing, and I just became a slave to that 3D printer, having to come in at 2 o'clock in the morning to change the 3D printer, come in at 8 o'clock again, to get the production going. And by the end of that project, I did not want to become a slave to the machine, and then equally, I didn't want the machine to be my slave, so I try to treat it as a collaborator. And in the process, I'm looking for the signature of each tool and material. So the hand, the machine, the substrate, each leave their own mark and contribute to the work. And I mean, and in line with the Techspressionism ethos, art has always absorbed the tools of its time, from the development of pigments to the lens, from reproduction to robotics. For every generation of artists, the tools shift. So onto the who. So I'm a former architect inventor. So that ran from 97 to 2017. I then shifted to art full time in 2018. In many ways, I'm doing the same thing, asking what's possible with this tool and this material. I'm also finding the opposite pole of my former career in the present, rather than chasing an idea that I had many years ago and try to realize it, try to make that idea real today. So As an architect, I was focused on prefabrication, 3D printing of buildings, which at that time was very new. And I did my doctorate at RMIT on that subject, creating visions and systems and exploring what was possible with the technology. I also developed the world's first 3D printed reef, which was deployed off the coast of Bahrain in around 2014. And then moved on to develop the FreeFab project, which was 100% reusable 3D print wax formwork with a huge machine, which is trying to convert to feet. It's about 92 feet by 24 feet by what's that? 5, 15 feet tall. So it's a huge machine. You can see on the left the process up the top. And then that was used for the Elizabeth line, which is used for the London Underground. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you. If you're interested in learning more, see the links below the image. I look forward to your questions if you have any later on.
All right. Thanks so much, Fawn. That was a really fascinating presentation, and just the multidisciplinary aspects of your career, I think are, something I identify with. I also am a designer in addition to doing my artwork, and I think those two sides inform each other considerably. And also the switching back and forth between analog and digital media. I do, sort of a similar process, not with CNC, but with painting. Kind of the two things, I'll paint and then run them through a printer and then paint again and back and forth, and it becomes sort of like a dialogue between the digital and the analog, and capturing the analog through photography and bringing it into the computer. And more recently I've started to work with a plotter. So it's no inkjet, it's just ink basically, drawing on top of like ink wash and stuff like that. And I think it's interesting to use technology and computers to create work that is not quote unquote digital art. That was actually sort of a point of contention between myself and actually the digital art curator of the Whitney Museum, believe it or not, who was on one of our roundtable discussions, and she insisted that sculpture created with technology was actually digital art, and I had to disagree with her in that I would consider it sculpture. So there's different viewpoints on that, but this sort of dichotomy is really something that led me to the idea of Techspressionism, that there should be a term that applies to work that involves technology, but isn't necessarily digital art in the traditional sense that I would conceive it, which would be work that's consumed on a screen. Other people might have different definitions of that, but that's my personal definition. So yeah, really enjoyed your presentation, learning more about your work. And we will hold our questions to the end, but I'm sure some people will have questions. So moving on, we have Mario Vielle from Brooklyn. So Mario, take it away.
Thanks, Colin. It's great to be here. Let's hope for all our sakes I can find my words today. I've been to a couple of salons, but I usually can't make it for the live ones. I've seen more on YouTube even, and I've seen a lot of Techspressionists' work. Y'all make amazing work, and I'm really stoked to be here. And for those of you that I don't know yet or haven't followed yet, I look forward to seeing your work. I think like the internet gets less cool in so many ways, and it's cool that a global artist community is like one kind of amazing thing that's happening in the modern internet. So cheers to that. Okay, hopefully my screen share is working and there are some images on the screen, and that you all can hear me. So these are 3 things I've posted in the last 3 days. I post abstract kind of glitchy, colorful images to Instagram every day. And I make them on my phone with a bunch of kind of simple and crude and cheap apps, a lot of even like DIY apps people have made. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about getting here because it all was a big accident and was not intended to happen or not supposed to happen by any design. And I'm only going to read one thing and then I'll talk freely. But on my highlights, I have this story that kind of quickly describes the process. And so I'll just read this for brevity. It says, every day I take a photograph, I duplicate it, manipulate all the dupes, layer them and manipulate the layers, and do lots of finger-made cuts and swipes, gestures in various apps, recoloring and recontextualizing, and following any other impulses until I arrive at my finished daily work to post. It's always one photograph. There's never anything else. I usually spend 30 to 45 minutes, though occasionally one will magically happen in a 15-minute accident. I love it very much. It's often the best part of my day. That is, in fact, true. And here are just a couple more kind of recent ones that I cherry picked that I think are like cool and representative of when it works well. Because, you know, when you do something every day, they're not all great, but I kind of liken it to fishing. And if you're always fishing, you're always catching stuff, and sometimes you catch a really cool one. But as I mentioned, it didn't really start with this. So I figured I'd go back many thousands of days to 2019 and show the first three images that I posted to this account. So the account is called Charity Cult. I post under the name Charity Cult. My name's Mario, but Charity Cult is the name of the account because Charity Cult is this like musical project I started in 2019. And I've always played in bands with other humans, but I thought it'd be cool to do just like a project without other humans and just using, you know, machines, meaning like drum machines and synthesizers, and make, you know, a record just doing that. So I had this new band. There aren't any humans, so there's not really like band photos to post. And I hate social media, as I'm sure many artists can relate. It's like, oh, I got to put something on this like social media timeline in an image sense. So these were some of the first pictures I posted, and they're just kind of like photographs with filters on them that encapsulate the vibe of what I thought might be cool. And that's kind of what it started out as. And, you know, just like finding a couple cool filters on like vibey apps that I thought matched up with it. And from there, it slowly started to deteriorate. The next couple of things I was posting were more abstract images, again, like trying to just get away from things you could totally recognize. And these are not made with actual long light exposure or anything. This is just me crudely like spinning in a circle while taking photos and hoping something cool happens and trying to get light distortions that way. I didn't even know how to do like any kind of long aperture stuff with a phone on a technical level. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but that wasn't what was going on here. And then from there, I started to find apps. You know, I kind of started to dig around in the App Store to look for ways to further kind of like distort and make these images a little more interesting. So these are some of then the next images that came up, and they're just like full on abstract, but like I'm not really doing anything here other than taking one starting image and then finding like one cool filter and, you know, someone's bunk your stuff out app and applying it and posting it and being like, oh, that's kind of cool and that's kind of a vibe. And then from there, I started to kind of find ways to apply it and kind of in a cryptic way show what was going on. You know, like in the middle image here, you can see there's a microphone right here. There's a speaker right here. On the right, this is like a close-up of some equalization knobs. And I don't even know what's on the left, but it was kind of like, you know, a simple kind of maybe close-up picture of a desk or something. But when you hit it with a filter, it starts to do this cool kind of triplicated thing. And so from there, started to play around with just like, oh, I can kind of hide what I'm doing. And so instead of posting boring pictures of, you know, just like a guitar or like a bunch of pictures of me, because that would be the worst thing in the world to start putting all over Instagram, I started to kind of blow them out and figure out ways to like hide what's going on in them. So on the left, you can see like a guitar. In the middle, this is another piece of equipment. On the right, this is like, I don't even remember what that is anymore, but you know, it gave a kind of cool spaced out, like almost like a Kubricky kind of result. So, you know, started to stumble into these results and got into them. And still, again, this is just putting some basic filters on things and hoping something cool happens. But that's where the idea to like really do what I'm doing now came. And it came in the form of, you know, thinking about like this is like a pedal board of guitar pedals. These are effects for a musician. And so like a guitar player would plug their guitar into this board of all these different devices. And then from the board, it goes out to the amplifier or speaker. And, you know, similar to using filters in an app, like for photo filters, like when music, you normally would use like one or two of these at a time too. You don't really turn them all on at once, but like, you know, you might turn this one on to get some reverb, or you might turn this one on to get some tremolo, which is a kind of wavering effect. But if you turn them all on, or you turn a bunch of them on, you start to get like discordant noise. And there's noise artists and there's artists in the, you know, audio world who work with these kinds of things in that capacity. And I started to think, well, all right, if you turn this sideways and reimagine these as apps, it basically just starts to look like a phone screen. And you know, what if I just found a bunch, like just, you know, kept going in for all these kind of apps? Like I'm into DIY software and DIY coding. Like I don't do any of that. I'm just into people who do cool stuff with that. So I started to find more and more and then thought like, what if I just like put an image through like 25 of these things, or like, you know, started going through like a bunch of them and then back out to other ones and back out. And, you know, when you rearrange them, even you get different outputs and all sorts of crazy stuff. So that's where from that point, I started to just like get a bunch of DIY apps and, you know, put them together in sorts of interesting ways and see what happened. And this next image is just Prince's pedal board because Prince is awesome. But from there, I started to kind of, as I worked with these apps, reference stuff and try to like somewhat control the output. And so things that was going for, like as I started to do this, obviously a lot of these apps are just straight up designed to make glitches. So there's just some exemplary glitch art here. On the left is one made by a human to look glitchy, but the middle example is just a photograph that was glitched out unintentionally by a screwed up software transfer. And then on the right is, you know, an example of someone's computer just kind of going bonkers on them and showing a recursion of a menu, you know, pop up because it's malfunctioning. So like I wanted to kind of get some of that malfunction, and some of these apps even allow you to use like a brush, but a brush that just kind of like distorts areas, or a brush that creates recursion in areas. So, you know, those are part of the layers. I'm also into a lot of old computer art, and when you really get stuff cooking through a bunch of apps, it starts to like get into these old color palettes and like pixelations. And a lot of these DIY apps actually output pretty low res results. So like a lot of my images end up being just like 1400 by 1400 or less of pixels. But I totally just celebrate that and think that's really cool. So now I'm warping forward like, you know, dozens and dozens of images since those kind of examples when I was just showing my first use of filters. And these are some of the first ones where I've kind of gotten through the tunnel of trying to figure out how to put apps together and get cool things out of them. So these are some of the first ones that I was like, okay, I kind of dig that. And you can, I think, see the influence of that old ANSI computer art with the popping kind of RGB colors, and also those glitch kind of pixelations and distortions, and also the recursion stuff of just, you know, taking, you know, your finger and like dragging your finger and making the image move. And from there started to realize like, oh yeah, like the phone screen is actually a canvas and your finger is actually a paintbrush, and started to realize like I can just start to take these images and like cut them up or swipe, you know, visual kind of strokes and gestures onto them and be a part of them. So I started getting more into it and more being a part of them from there. And so other influences started to creep in. So of course, like Memphis design, it's not only a design that I love and am a fan of, and anyone who was a kid of the 80s would be a fan of, but also lots of modern artists reference Memphis design. So Memphis, you'll see in a lot of like current, glitch art and like retro art and things of that nature. So I started trying to figure out ways to work that energy into it. And then also just getting into like, oh, right, we're just kind of making abstract works like Kandinsky or Pollock. So started to really kind of consciously try to like bring in some of that energy and chaos to the vibes. And so these are some works that were a little further down the experimental line where I'm being more conscious about trying to, really capture that energy and bring energy into the pieces and really work with colors. The earlier ones I wasn't really recoloring yet, but I started to discover too, like, oh, if you just like, I work with a lot of masks and like layering masks, but also just like object masks and area masks. And if you start recoloring and you know, assigning color to colors against other colors, things that totally sucked can all of a sudden become awesome. And I think these are also good examples of before I worked with the color and was kind of near the end of the line. I was like, oh, these are kind of not really doing anything maybe special, but once you get the colors right, they can pop and be cool. And so the next couple of things that were influential to doing this too were street artists who just kind of really quickly in like a 20-minute span on the street will just like sit down with some really simple tools, some spray paint in these cases, and some like cups to get the circle shapes and end up with a really cool, vibrant and striking results. And also as I got into like all the swiping gestures and it even kind of relates to Memphis, but there's just the energy and motion and like ribbon dance. And I really started to kind of consciously try to work these long, kind of singular swipe gestures into pieces and find ways to overlay with them. So, intentionally clocking a lot of that stuff too. So then these are just a couple more examples that show that kind of energy and like the human hand at work in trying to get the stuff to pop and just like feel like it's something or show something. So that's just kind of a quick and dirty of what happened and how it accidentally slid into making and posting these things every day on my phone like a crazy person. And here's just three more kind of semi-recent ones to kind of end us on. And the only other last thing that I would say that's coming back to like one more musical influence thing is it started out with thinking about it musically like pedals, like a guitar pedal board and chaining effects and everything, but also just like a philosophically simple thing like parameters, something I've been conscious about too. And the Ramones are a great example of a classic punk band who worked with really simple parameters. They only used three chords. They wore leather jackets and jeans all the time. They worked in a simple, tight framework, but they did just a bunch of really amazing work in that framework. And they also, because of that, showed a lot of people that anyone could play music and start a band with their friends. Before that, it was always kind of like these titanic trained musicians, and you could only imagine being one of them. But with the Ramones, you were like, oh, I could be one and I could do that. So, some of those simple parameters that I'm putting in place are like my images are just a square. I don't change that. They're just one photo. I never add others. I don't complicate it. They're made on the day of, and I don't sit around and worry about changing something the next day. They're already posted, they're already done, and you just get to move on with it. So just that simplicity of it is kind of a core essence of it. So anyway, that's pretty much what I'm doing over there. So yeah, thanks everybody.
All right. Thanks so much, Mario. Really enjoyed that. And again, I forgot that to even read Fawn's text. I guess I'm just like losing my reading abilities. I always just I'll take the excuse of Andy Warhol's quote. I never read. I just look at the pictures, and I like that. I can subscribe to that. So maybe I'll do like a recap after all four artists have presented, and I'll read all this statements and then open it up just so you guys will have a little reminder. Awesome. So the last but not least presenter is Bo Tardy, and he is zooming in from Houston, Texas. So I will hand the mic over to Bo.
Yes, thank you very much, Colin, and great presentations. Love to see that. Also, love to be included in a group of people who are exploring, the intersection of technology and art. I think it's been a long time coming, and it's sort of something that I saw coming a long time ago, and kind of been. I made up this joke. I've been standing at the intersection of art and technology for a long time, waiting for the light to change, and it's finally changed. So I'm happy to be part of this forum. I really appreciate it, Colin. So anyway, before I play my video, you gave me 10 minutes, so I filled up 10 minutes with video. Just one little footnote. I am French and American, so I've lived on both continents. And my birth name was Jean Tardy, Jean-Marie Tardy. So you'll see a lot of my credits for my work is to Jean Tardy. I changed my name in 2006 because I was tired of having to explain to the banks and the credit card companies that I was Jean Tardy and I didn't have to go get the woman of the house. It was so it got too complicated, and I figured I'd always been called Bo from when I was a kid by my American family, so I just switched my name over officially. But so you'll see a lot of my early work is signed Jean Tardy, and so I just wanted to clear up that confusion. I'm going to go ahead and play my video, and hopefully it will work the way it's supposed to. So let me start share.
My name is Bo Tardy, and I am an artist. My tag is Be Love, because I believe that love is the most powerful force in the universe. And love is what I want to communicate as an artist. My work merges high art and low art, fine art and pop art, traditional means and modern technology. My art is called electronism. My style freely borrows from pop culture and mass media because I believe that today's artist needs to use all available media modalities to be effective in a hyper-saturated world. I see myself as an art scientist. Early on, while studying illustration and painting in art school and getting my work published in magazines like the East Village Eye, I realized that the future of art was digital. I took the very first computer graphics class at Parsons School of Design and also applied for a grant from the French Ministry of Culture for my electronism project. The term digital art didn't really exist at the time, and computer graphics was still frowned upon. They were derisively called flying logos. Pretty soon, though, I was making flying logos of my own. Still, I knew there was much more that could be done with the technology, and so I started experimenting using these expensive tools when nobody was watching. That meant staying overnight or on weekends to get access to the machine. I started making my own computer video art.
And passed through Jericho. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus, which was the chief among the publicans. And he was rich. And he sought to see Jesus, who he was, and could not for the press, because he was little of stature. And he ran before and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see Jesus. For he was to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him. And said,
This is the work that ultimately got me a job at MTV.
"Make haste."
MTV's Real World Marathon, 7 episodes back to back. Next Saturday morning at 11:30. MTV's Real World Marathon.
Now playing on a TV set near you, the MTV Movie Awards. And now your host, Dennis Miller.
At MTV, I did graphics for Yo MTV Raps, The Real World, MTV News, and promos. Then I started my own motion design company called Dizzy Worldwide, doing work for many TV and commercial clients.
Sharp-bladed like an serrated sharp issue. We keep it sharp-bladed like an serrated sharp issue. We keep it sharp-bladed. We keep it sharp-bladed like an serrated sharp issue. We keep it sharp-bladed like an serrated sharp issue. We keep it sharp-bladed. We keep it sharp. We keep it sharp. We keep it sharp-bladed like an. We keep it sharp. We keep it sharp. We keep it sharp. Keep it sharp-bladed, sharp-bladed. We keep it sharp. We keep it sharp. We keep it sharp. Keep it sharp, sharp-bladed, sharp. We keep it sharp. We keep it sharp. We keep it sharp-bladed like an serrated Uragana. Sharp-bladed.
I still felt boxed in creatively and decided to start my own public access TV show, simply called TV. It was very experimental and pioneered a style which is today called glitch.
This is how it should be done.
Ran from 1993 to 1999.
Yes, this is TV. Live broadcast here on Channel 69. Today, August 16, 1997. is 6 p.m. and 19 minutes, 22 seconds. Pretty soon we'll be putting the phone number up on the screen so you can call in and participate in today's live broadcast of TV. Today's special guest is DJ Datside in full effect on the turntables, bringing it to you live.
DJ Datside.
Later, it became a YouTube channel mostly featuring Vaporwave. At some point, I even leased a broadcast TV station for almost 2 years until COVID knocked us off the air. But that's a different story. Today, I focus on doing work with meaning and finding formats that resonate independently of medium and style, which means embracing new technologies to be at the forefront of this new movement.
Hello, I'm Susie, your friendly personal digital assistant. I was created using artificial intelligence by artist Bo Tardy to enhance your experience of the metaverse. Are you looking into the past or looking into the future? It's hard to tell from here. Is this real? Is this art? Ask me any question. I may be artificial, but I am intelligent. The current acting president of the United States summoned the Council of Advisors on Science and Technology to discuss the risks and opportunities inherent in artificial intelligence.
All right, that's it. Thanks so much for watching.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah. I was sharing with the group before we started recording that I lived a couple blocks away from Bo, and probably a decade after he was there. I don't know how long, Bo, how long were you living like downtown? Like was that public access show made like you were still down there in the late 90s?
Yeah, I was. I went to art school in the 80s, and that's when I first lived in the East Village. And then I moved back to New York in the 90s, and that's when I started my working at MTV, obviously, and then I started working with my own motion design company, and I simultaneously did my public access show. So yeah, the 90s, the whole 90s. I was living first in the East Village, then as I got a little bit older, I was making a little bit more money. We moved over to Varick Street, which is sort of Soho, I guess you would call it. So I was an artist. I got to move to Soho. Yay. I graduated from the East Village to Soho.
That's wild. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, the 90s drum and bass definitely took me back. There were a lot of UK DJs coming through New York at that time, and that was really, very fond memories of that. So yeah, really amazing work.
Drum and bass. I used to play it all the time on the whole point of the show was to play new music, and so electronic music, electronica, drum and bass. That was we broke a bunch of artists. Actually, I interviewed a bunch of artists. They were coming over from Europe and everything. I just showed you, obviously, just a little piece of one of the shows, but it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, we will have to continue this conversation about our parallel paths in downtown. That's great. So, and also with Fawn, I actually lived in Sydney for a little while when I was a kid. So it's really interesting how, all these paths sort of intertwine. So I'm going to go ahead and reread Tina's, and then kind of go through the bios really quick, and then we'll open it up. So a recap. Tina Anderson is a cultural historian and visual architect using AI-assisted image making to realize dark mechanical worlds. Her work is inspired by the sacred and the technological, where ritual, myth, architecture, and artificial bodies intersect. Fawn from Erskineville, Australia, which is a suburb of Sydney, is a multidisciplinary artist working between analog gestural floor drawing and a collaborative CNC machine translation process for the creation of multi-material abstract relief paintings. His work explores tool signatures and ambiguity as a process for creating conscious presence. Mario Vielle, also known as Charity Cult, from Brooklyn, New York, is a musician and abstract digital artist who uses an array of apps in a chain to make highly distorted and effervescent visual expressions from a unique source image every day. His work channels glitch, abstract expressionism, off-the-cuff street art, classic ANSI art, and more. And Bo Tardy from Houston, Texas, or at least broadcasting or narrowcasting, as we should say, from Houston, Texas, is a multidisciplinary artist whose work bridges the gap between fine arts and technology-driven media. He attended Parsons School of Design and was awarded a French Ministry of Culture Art grant for his Electronism project. He went on to work in broadcast television for MTV and other TV networks. His work is called Electronism. All right. Hopefully I pronounced that properly. I like the isms though. We are going to open it up now to questions from the audience. I actually have a lot of questions, but I've been talking too much already, so I'm gonna field some questions from the audience. And if you'd like, use the React tool in the toolbar, and there's a raise hand option. So if you have a question, please do that, and then I'll see you at the top of the participants list. Anyone? All right, well, I'm going to start one. Oh, no, we got one here. There's a motion sensor in the hallway, hence there is light. Got a question from Clayton Campbell.
Hi, everybody. Forgive me for not being live on video. I just am really tired of looking at myself today. However, Tina, I wanted to ask you just a simple question, and if you'd care to share some of the visual applications you're working with, if that's all right.
Yes, sure. But my English is very basic. Sorry.
So my understanding of English is fairly basic too, so don't worry.
Okay, sure. Let's go.
So just curious, when you are, it's interesting to see you lay out your process in different steps, from looking at sacred books, engravers like Robert Flood, so on. But when you get to the point of generating images that you then work with further, I'm just curious which AI visual applications you've been working with and which ones you find the most suitable for what your overall project is.
It's about my pipeline. In fact, I'm start to discussing all the idea and start to make a reference with ChatGPT. It's like a basic draft. And after that, I use this draft in Nana Banana too.
Okay.
And after that, I start to make any changes. And after that, I use a Sedence or a Kling. It's really nice to work. It's Sedence, it's about plastic, soft moving. I like it a lot. So it's not a very simple way to create something, because I like details, I like philosophy, I like changing optics and lights, and make a lot of different ways to show one idea.
Okay. That's great. And thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate your work and seeing it today. And welcome to Techspressionism.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? I guess I have a question, and I would direct it to both Fawn and Bo, in terms of working commercially with digital tools and then working personally with digital tools. That's something that I also share with you guys, in that most of like I ended up in New York in 1994. So I was in a little shop building CD-ROMs, and the owner of the shop came in one day and said, "Hey, there's this new way to distribute multimedia globally. It's called the World Wide Web. We've got to get in on this thing." So they're like, "You're the youngest guy, they're a three-man shop." And he's like, you need to learn how to code HTML." And that was a lucky break. So my web work has been sort of funding my art habit for the last 30 years, I would say, although I phased out most of my client work, just enough to pay for my studio space and my art materials, and keep this project going. So but I've found that most of the tools that I learned over the course of my commercial work, and I was doing actually pre-press print work back before that, with Quark Express and other stuff, even going from shooting stats in a dark room through the point that we were using a linotype machine and literally waxing and cutting and pasting stuff onto boards. So like it's been a journey where I see that how much digital work and computers have integrated themselves into design and commercial work such as architecture. So I was wondering if each of you guys, Bo and Fawn, could speak to that a little bit, and let everybody know how those two aspects of your work have informed each other. There's one person in particular, Zaha Hadid, who is known very well as an architect, but also was very multidisciplinary. And I remember seeing her work in the Guggenheim. It was retrospective, and there was everything from wall sculptures to building plans, prototype automobiles. And I just thought how fearless she was in not trying to hide one side from the other, that it was this integrated self and not really requiring a definition. So I thought that was really interesting. Anyway, that's enough out of me, but that's kind of like my jumping off point.
Bo, do you want to go first?
Let me turn around my Okay, sorry. So I have two things to say about that. Obviously, I've thought about it over the years, but I think in today's day and age, these sort of two poles, and at least in my philosophy, they combine with all the other kind of dichotomies that I don't really wrestle with. I actually find them very fruitful, the combination of things. First of all, pop art versus traditional art. But then obviously traditional means versus technology. I mean, all art has always used technology. I think Fond actually said that in his presentation. Impressionism only came to be because of photography and the ability to take paint outside because it was in tubes. So technology is actually, the word technique means art. So that's why I did that NFT that says there's no more art, there's only technology, because really it is the same thing. It's just the tools we use and to reshape the world around us. A lot of I don't want to get too much into this, but a lot of the real breakthroughs in technology were created by artists. Samuel Morse invented the telegraph. He was a very famous portrait artist who actually painted early American presidents. He was very good. I've actually seen some of his paintings in real life, and he was a very accomplished portrait artist. And he invented the telegraph, which is basically the forefather of the internet. So, and perspective was created by artists. The whole 3D grid concept was created by the Renaissance artists. And we're living on the grid today. I think AI is the grid accelerated, to use a Marshall McLuhan term. I don't see those things as conflicting. I see them as actually generating, self-generating new modes of understanding and of communicating. And as far as the commercial versus the fine art, I was talking to my son, who's also an animator, and he came up with this quip that I thought was just genius. I wish I'd thought of it, but he said, "Dad, all art becomes commercial eventually." It just matters whether the artist is able to cash in on it or not, like Van Gogh was not. But, all art becomes commercial. It's just eventually everybody catches up to it. And then the art becomes design and becomes integrated, and it becomes a cliche, to use another Marshall McLuhan term. I would say that as an artist, that's why I like to call myself an art scientist. I'm looking to come up with a new format, a new mode, and then to take that mode and then to integrate it into a cliche. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's all I got at this point.
Awesome. So Fawn, what do you think?
Yeah, so I guess I've always had like this love-hate relationship with technology. So the tools that I use are kind of yeah, it always feels like a battle. So that's why I'm sort of always, going back to analog and then sort of introducing the digital and trying to find a balance that is sort of sustainable. I mean, I've spent years just on computers doing CAD design and digital work, and just I think after a while it just kind of I just wanted something more. So, but I think back to your question, am I using the tools that I used in architecture or as an inventor? And I am. I mean, I'm still using Rhino, still using Photoshop. Picked up a few new software, VCarve and GSender and other things. But it's yeah, I mean, there's just it's very fluid. And I mean, as you were saying with Zaha did, I mean, I wish I could integrate everything and just have a career that was just one big fluid thing. But there's definitely a lot of crossover.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate both responses. It made me think about how when I first started getting into web work, I was bouncing around these different ad agencies, and I was at this one called Kirschenbaum and Bond, which was actually down in Soho. And they were doing all the stuff for Snapple at the time. They came up with these weird characters, Wendy, the Snapple lady, and all this cast of characters. So I got involved with them doing commercial work. And, I found that most of the designers, production people, whoever working with graphics there also at night would go home and make weird stuff like I did, and I always found their quote unquote personal work to be just of next level caliber compared to like going into an art gallery and looking at it and being like, all right, what is that? Like, like I could just decode it instantly and be like, okay, that's like, the twirl filter, whoop-de-doo, you know what I mean? And then you see these people who are like, creative directors or animators and stuff, and then they're making this stuff at home, but it's at the production level quality of like corporate work, but it's this bizarre, weird personal work, which I think is really, it's interesting. So yeah, leading into that, I guess I have a question for Mario too, about the crossover between music and visual work. How I guess, I guess my question is sort of like, um, do you find now, I don't know if you're still making music or not, but I mean, do you find now that working visually has then fed back into what you're doing with sound?
Uh, yeah, so that's a really interesting question, uh, because like definitely yes, as much as I can. What's funny is since I made the record that I was talking about at the beginning of the presentation, and like my idea was like, okay, I'll make that record and then I'll go in and I'll make another record for this project, which is still part of the plan. But like it's interesting, like whatever we do with our life, like whatever our creative pursuit is, we have to like figure out marrying commerce and survival with that. And so like for really like all of my kind of adult life, I've worked in recording studios and I work with bands and I work with artists, whether it's as an engineer, a mixer, mastering records, or producing, or on the artist side as a musician. But what tends to happen is like there's the joke about being the mechanic on the street with the only car that doesn't run, where it's like I'm always dealing with so much of this with music in my work that it's always like, okay, like I'm working on this song for like charity cult. Well, I got to do this other thing, and I really got to do this other thing because otherwise, the hammer is going to fall down. And like that's the days just roll on and on. And so what's funny is like art, like visual art, like I always loved visual art and trying to do that too. But even then, when I was younger, it was kind of like as you get into things, you experiment with things and you really follow the path that like calls you most. And like I just got called to music more. Like you start playing in bands and for me, like I started playing in bands and then you get really busy with that. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I was doing this visual art stuff, but now I'm not, just because like that's like the time, time is just like a monster. And time is the monster that I'm always trying to like battle and failing at. Um, but what I'm getting to is so the visual art now is kind of like become again like my thing. Like I don't work on visual art for any clients or anything like that. It's just my thing. I think that's why it's become kind of like a daily thing. And it's like kind of untouchable. And it gets me back to that thing where it's like, because as someone who works in music, and I'm sure with everyone else here too, with your art or whatever you do, however you do it, like with the music, especially as it became like also my job, uh, you have to find the kid in you again and like always kind of keep reconnecting that. What's been cool about the visual art is that it's like reconnected me in a very organic and easy way. Like I don't ever have to like, work for it. It's just kind of there. So no, that's not exactly the answer to the question, but like that's just kind of where things are at with the two different kind of worlds and the process and how they interact. And I guess if there's one thing to say to answer the question, it's just that like, yeah, I definitely, when I do get time to work on stuff on the music side, autonomously, I am trying to take a lot of those same ideas of just aesthetic and vibe and like not working with a tool the way that it's intended to be worked with. Like I really like that conceptually. So yeah, there you go.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, like, each one of the artists who presented today, I find something I can relate to, and um, it's like with Tina's work, I feel like, I don't know if you guys, someone's mic is on. I asked her if she had ever played Myst, which some of you might or might not know about, but Myst was a sort of a game, a computer game from the 90s. And I saw her work and I was like, wow, that reminds me a lot of Myst, and it was this sort of fantasy world. Somebody's mic is on. I don't know who it is, but at any rate, I think it's Tommy. Okay, muted. So yeah, and then with what Mario was saying, well, there was two things that popped into my head. One is that the upside of social media is it's provided you a regimen of like, all right, I got to post something. And then it's like you're making work day after day after day because there's a platform for it to get published on, which I guess is a good reason for social media to exist. I mean, I guess that's how people ended up at his everydays and all of that kind of stuff. And then the child, or like refinding. It's funny, like, finally, like I got a new studio space, and I'm really hoping like I get this will kickstart me into making new work again, because I've been sort of stagnant for the last like couple months, just, and it's weird because I actually have been getting more pleasure out of doing design work for Techspressionism than my own work. Like if I'm able to put together a microsite for an exhibition or come up with a nice portal for like this 3D collaboration, like it's actually more stimulating to me than being like, all right, what am I going to do for like a new bunch of paintings? Like, I got to come up with something. There's a show coming up, like, and it starts feeling like, oh man, like, so I'm hoping that like basically I'll just come in here and just start messing around with stuff. That's usually when all the best stuff happens. Is I'm just like, oh, like I wonder what'll happen if I do this thing that this machine is not made for, or this program is not intended for, and it's something that I kind of got from everybody. And it's really interesting. I think that getting a bunch of artists together, um, at least for me, like I see, I remember when I first started this thing, and Davo, who some of you guys might know, he was like a very early moderator. He was actually the person that first said Devonte Bradley is the artist full name. He said, like, because the first 7 salons were not recorded. We was just hanging out on Zoom shooting the shit. He's like, why don't we record these things? And I was like, that's a good idea. And he's like, you should have a YouTube channel set up for this. Like, yeah, that's a good idea. And then he became like the moderator for, a whole slew of the early salons. And it's like Bo brought up McLuhan, and like, all of the just media. It's such a it's just such a it's so open. It could be used for anything, and people, I think about it as inherently tied to mass media, but really, like us as artists, we can take control of media and do whatever we want with it. And I think that this idea of social sculpture. When I was first doing stuff, I was working with Real Video, which was a really early streaming video format when everyone was on dial up and it was crappy and there was no audience. But I was like having artists interview other artists and finding weird, like homeless poets in the village and like bringing them into into my studio and having like them recite poetry and then streaming it onto like no audience that was even watching it. But it's planted the seeds. And then like one of the people I got connected to, he was actually teaching computer art at School of Visual Arts in the city at the time. And he said, what you're doing reminds me of this idea of social sculpture that an artist named Joseph Beuys came up with. And I had forgot about that. And then when I started doing this thing with Techspressionism, it came back, and it's like social sculpture, where like society itself could be a medium to work in, and like finding people connecting to each other, independently of anything I do. There just happen to be, oh, like, let me check out this person's Instagram, and then they start corresponding. And all of a sudden, like, there's like collaboration, collabs and projects popping up between people. And it's super cool. And then like a bunch of artists are organizing this show in LA that's opening up in a couple of weeks. Totally, it's just like, you guys run with it, whatever. And like, I'll publish it on the site. And just seeing that, witnessing that, it's very gratifying. I feel like in a way it makes my own personal work seem sort of trivial, honestly, to see the interconnections happening between people, like something important is happening, I think, and it's really like I planted a seed, and now all this other stuff is happening because everyone else is watering it and, pouring miracle on it. Something like that. So anyway, I'm just rambling now, but we still have a little time if anyone has any other questions, or if any of the participating artists want to share anything.
I think it was a good point. Is sort of need to have a hobby or a an outlet to sort of to find your next kind of the next thing. When you're mentioning the professionals that you're working with that had an art going in the background. I mean, that was what I was doing, when I was working as an inventor. it's just so high stress, this sort of corporate job that I had, that I'd go home and just, sculpt on the weekend, and that was, like just totally helped to relax, and then I ended up, finding that was useful for thinking about, how to design artificial reefs, and so I think, you need to have these little outlets, like Mario's, fantastic, phone art, just to have this outlet, this spark of imagination that allows you to reimagine and to find something new. And I mean, also, you mentioned moving into a new studio. I always find that, I mean, I've just moved into a new studio here a few months ago, and I always find that a new studio changes your art because the tools that you have access to are different. The space is different. What's possible is different. And so it always shifts. But trying to have those uh, I don't know, the little kind of uh, things that you can spark off, to have a side project so you've always got something that's interesting and to shift to when you get a bit stuck, in your work.
Yeah, I would say that what James is saying is true in Mario as well, in terms of being able to have a playground to experiment in, because that's where the new work can emerge from, and I think it's very important to experiment. That's what I think our role as an artist is, to sort of to walk the tightrope without a net. We have to be able to experiment freely. But then again, what Colin was saying is that we need to take possession as artists of the media and what all that entails. And I think one of the ideas behind Techspressionism is to also take hold of the technology and not be afraid of it and be willing to integrate that into the experimentation. And I think that's a very important approach. But I think that also it's sometimes you have to work within the commercial sphere. And the way I like to look at it is because some of this technology is very advanced. For me, for example, computer graphics were very advanced in the late 80s, early 90s. And there was no way for me to get my hands on the technology except for stepping into the commercial world. And same with you, Colin. I think with some of the work that you were doing as well, you had to be, the only way to get hold of that technology was to do it for a corporate client. And thinking about that, what I've come up with is that as artists, we need to learn how to use this technology. And what a better schooling than to do it on somebody else's dime, right? So I just see it as school. It's just an education. We're learning the tools. Let somebody else pay for it, and we can learn the tools, but then we have to reintegrate it into our work. And so, as an artist, that's how I like to look at it. But I'm no longer afraid of mass media, pop culture, commercialism versus fine art, traditional versus pop, because I think it's all part of the dialogue. As an artist, we're trying to recreate the language. So we need to be able to integrate all those elements into it. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I like that quote from your son. In the end, it's sort of like, it's a real paradox with artists. I think that struggle of like, I don't want to be commercial, but of course I want to sell my work, but I just don't want to be commercial, and then if you're a musician and you have a sold out show, you're stoked, and then if you're an artist and someone says you're sold out, you're like, whatever, man, you're just jealous, calling me a sellout, so it's weird, I mean, it's just sort of like, there's all these preconceived notions about like what art is and what's commercial. I think working on both ends of like sort of industry and then, working with one's own personal ideas, with those same tools. That's something that, I see quite a bit here in these Zoom sessions in the community. It's a lot of artists who got their chops by doing stuff for other people. And when there's like a corporate client breathing down your neck, like it's got to be this way or make it pink or whatever, then you just have to learn how to do it, and like make it the way they want it. A lot of times I'm doing work for a client, I'm like, have it your way. It's ugly, but you're paying me my rate. I don't care, and then I go home or whatever, clock out, and then I'm doing whatever I want. And no one can say anything to me about it. So that's the freedom, being an artist. And yeah, I'm very excited to be in a new space. Back when I was living in the East Village on Avenue A, I remember, I always kind of like, I always enjoyed Andy Warhol, like just what he did. Like I've come to appreciate his work aesthetically, but initially it was just more about like what he actually did, like in terms of how he approached the idea of art. And he went into it very consciously from being one of the top illustrators. I'm going to do that art thing, set up a factory. It's like this guy had a name for his studio, like, so it's like, I got to come up with a good name for my studio. And I had this little tiny studio apartment. I was like, and I was always into sci-fi and like William Gibson and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what, like, I'm going to call it the pod. And I would shut my blinds and I was like, on the first, webcam, those Connectix little eyeball cams. And there was a program called, I Visit that I met all these weird people on, all around the world that were on the very first the very first, it was written by the same guy. There was one called See You, See Me, and that was Cornell University See Me. This guy, Tim Dorsey, I think was his name, was the programmer who came up with this. It was the first commercial web, online, whatever, video conferencing software. And he wrote it when he was in college in Cornell. And, I remember I met someone, got into a relationship through this app. And I wrote to him, there were no dating things. Like it was just random weird nerds like going on there like, whoa, we could see each other. This is cool, And then I wrote to the Tim, like the guy who coded, and he's like, yeah, I had the same experience, it didn't work out. And it's like, you see this person in this virtual, it's very strange, but it's really interesting to see the technology evolve. And, with AI and then, the state of VR. I mean, like I got a new headset recently, and I mean, it's I've tried the Apple and the Vision Pro. If any of you have the opportunity to do a shameless plug for Apple, but a demo at the Apple Store, it is unreal. I mean, just the eye tracking. You look at the icon and it highlights it, and then you just tap your fingers and it just feels like it is connected to your brain. I mean, I'm not going to buy one. There's no good use case that I have for it, but I mean, it's a wild experience. So yeah, shameless plug for Apple. But all right, well, I mean, we're getting a little to the end of this time, but if anyone has any other questions, anyone want to throw a question out there for one or any of the other artists presenting, or looking pretty good?
I'll say something kind of random here, but based on some of the stuff that's just been discussed, especially for me working with a bunch of kind of DIY apps, and you all are talking about like the technology that you work with and especially the older technology. One of the things I've already experienced is kind of becoming dependent on a certain tool for a certain thing, and it then becoming abandonware. And all of a sudden you update, because I've been doing this for a few years, so like you update a phone or you update a operating system, and all of a sudden this tool that all of a sudden you used to think was like exactly what you needed to use to do something is gone, and there's like really no way to get it back. And like, or even talking about old games like Myst, where like you can't experience that in the modern day without a remaster that runs on modern software, or finding the old hardware to do it. And so as I've been working, I've been thinking a lot about like autonomy of process and just like, especially as we use like weird specialized tools. Because, you know, if you get to know all the Adobe suite of tools, like they're always going to be there and they're going to be there in 5 years and 10 years and they're going to be supported and updated. But when you get into weird technology, whether it's, you know, a big old machine that beeps and that can do some sort of special thing, or, um, you know, just like a weird little app that some one dude who was really stoned coded and just like put out there for like $4. Like these are amazing things, but there is this kind of like fleeting, um, you know, feeling about working with some of them. It's like even just like an old machine can break down, and then all of a sudden you're just like, I don't have anything to do with that, or I don't have anything that can do that anymore. So I've already been through that experience a few times, both with the visual project here, but also in, you know, with like equipment and working with stuff in the music sense. But it's just been like an interesting thing to keep a mind about, where it's like, as we make things, it's like, how much of this is, do I have control over? If like the world blew up, like could I do this art with just like, you know, bare minimum resources, or like with a totally different set of, you know, apps, or a different operating system, or a different machine, and you know, just kind of in some of those experiences where the thing kind of like, this is like kind of getting into the moving into a new studio and how things kind of change. It's like they could be painful, but then also in the experience of like trying to desperately find something that kind of does what it used to do, you might find something that does kind of do it. It might do something newer and cooler and better, but then also not be able to do exactly the old specified thing the other thing could do. So just like that kind of you know, ongoing wrestle of the technology is just another just interesting part of doing it all. And it's something to kind of be mindful of going forward too. It's like I've always been thinking about like data, and like you always have to have backups of data. I've also gone through some severe data loss where like hundreds of hours of a project might be lost, you know, long ago when I was young and stupid. But like I've more recently been starting to think of it too in terms of like a program and an operating system that can run it, and keeping old technology around just in case you need to get to something, and just like crazy things of that nature. So that's just a little something extra to think
Absolutely. Yep. I still have my Commodore 1541 drive sitting under my laptop stand as a reminder of what I, you know, fell in love with back in the day, you know, and now I run it as an emulator when I get the urge. But all right, so I guess we're going to close it out. But I really appreciate all of the shares. It was an amazing session. I hope, you know, all four of you continue to come and, you know, engage with the community and build community. You know, like one thing I will say as a closing note is that like the way this LA show happened is a bunch of the artists out in LA like got together, they found a space, LA Center for Digital Art, which this guy Rex Bruce started a long, long time ago. I was in a show there when I was in grad school. You know, I didn't go there. I emailed him something and he printed it out. But you know, basically, like what I think this group really has to offer is in the artist index, like you could pretty much look up a bunch of other artists that are in your area and just find a space and put a show together. Geez, there's artists, you know, a bunch of artists in Australia, in Russia that have participated in past shows. Um, you know, certainly, you know, most states at this point, I mean, not like it needs to be geographically focused, but I think that makes for an interesting physical exhibition. And when you're looking for a space and you say, well, I'm part of this international artist community, then all of a sudden, you know, like organizations or curators are like, really, tell me more about that, you know. Whereas if I like knocked on some door and I'm like, hey, like I make art, you know, they're like, all right, get in line, buddy, or just like, sorry, you know. So it's an interesting way to get in a door and then, you know, organize things and put a show together or curate whatever, you know. Like I feel like that's also very gratifying to see other artists, you know, gain visibility, create connections and networks, you know, through this community. So I would encourage you guys all to do that. And for anybody on here that has questions or interest in any of the four presenters, artists' work, I'm sure they would be very happy if you sent them a message off Instagram or whatever, and start a dialogue. So maybe even between some of the artists that presented here today. So with that being said, I'm going to stop the recording, and we do this thing called an after party here, where basically after the recording ends, anyone who wants to just hang out and shoot the shit can do so. This is usually when we, come up with topics for like upcoming salons and stuff like that, or people could just like talk freely and not worry about it being recorded. Not like I give a shit anyway, but some other people might. So that's why we have the after party. The origin story of that is that really early on, one of the more prominent artists involved said, we should really have an advisory board to guide the development of the group. And I was like, not having a freaking advisory board, you know what I mean? Come on, like whatever. So the after party is pretty much the advisory board where, people hash out ideas and come up with things. And that's ends up being what happens usually. So, all right. So I'm going to stop the recording in 3, 2, 1 and cut.